Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
Adam, I was expecting you to do something, and you didn't.
No,
and
I was.
That threw me off.
Yeah, I was trying to get level
Yeah.
and look as big and sort it out.
So today we are talking about season 1 of The Last of Us. We generally just stick to movies here, but every once in a while there's a show that gets big enough and we all see that we think it would be fun to talk about. So we'll be doing a spoiler review of the entire season. Not going to get too into the nitty gritty. Should still be similar to a regular movie review, but go over all of season 1. So there will be spoilers because it's hard to talk about an entire season of a show without bringing up anything that happens after basically episode 2.
That's true.
So if you haven't started it,
do it.
Absolutely. Do it.
That.
Watch the thing and then come back. We'll be talking about it. So Adam, what is The Last of Us about?
Oh boy. The Last of Us. After a global pandemic destroys civilization, a hardened survivor takes charge of a 14-year-old girl who may be humanity's last hope.
All right.
Should be noted this is based on a video game, so this is one of the first real solid, this is good adaptation from a video game. Normally when movies get made into video games or vice versa, the first thing that comes out is great and the second thing not so much. One of my thoughts is what they made an Enter the Matrix game after the Matrix movies made a bunch of money and those came out. And those were fun to play, but they were not good by any stretch of the imagination. They're making a Mario movie, a Super Mario movie, which that will remain to be seen how good that is. But normally the adaptations of a video game to movie or vice versa do not go as planned. Halo, the TV show, has been a prime example of how not to adapt a beloved franchise from a video game. So.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to ask if this is the best adaptation of a video game ever.
It absolutely is, in my opinion.
I mean, I think that's reasonable.
It could be. I feel like there might be one random one that I don't realize is a video game or was. So I don't know. I might be missing something.
I think they are coming out with a Tetris movie too, so I bet that,
honestly, I can't tell if you're kidding or not, but I wouldn't.
They are. They are.
Yeah. So, I guess first thought, I never played the game, but
me neither.
I, for the most part, really liked this season of TV. It felt like the first time in a while where, whenever there's a good HBO show.
Yep.
I feel like you can tell pretty early that like, okay, they did this right. And it was quickly, like shortly into season or episode 1, where I just kind of felt like, okay, it had that, whatever that magic feeling is that is there when you feel like you're watching good TV.
Yeah.
That feeling was present for me within the first like 10 minutes of the first episode. It's not to say it was my favorite episode of the entire series or season or anything, but it was just evident to me right away that, like, yeah, this is going to work.
I mean, I don't remember exactly when the game came out. I also didn't play it because it was a PlayStation exclusive, and I am but a lowly Xbox and PC player.
About a decade ago, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago because they've made 2 of them. But I remember when it came out, everyone saying it was a fantastic game, and it wasn't just a fantastic game because the gameplay was fun, which is normally what the games are judged by, and the graphics and the visuals were great, but because the storyline is so interesting and so solid. That's what really drew a lot of people in, and I talked to a lot of people who have gone out and bought a PlayStation for this game specifically to play it. So they knew they had a good storyline to start with, which is definitely helpful, and then building upon that and adapting it into a different medium. I think people were always going to question, oh, how does it hold up to the source material? And it sounds like they got basically the same writers, they got the same composers and stuff to do sound, and it was very much transplanting the same team or much of the same team to adapt it into the TV show. And I think that's part of its success.
I think there were a lot of nice touches too, as far as like casting goes, where actors who voiced the characters in the game, not always returning, like, they recast Joel and Ellie, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, I think the guy who voiced Joel played one of the sort of militant guys in Kansas City, the kind of the right-hand man.
Yeah.
And then the woman who voiced Ellie played Ellie's mom in that flashback scene at the beginning of episode 9. So that kind of stuff is cool too, to just keep people who were involved while kind of augmenting it and just adding people with more TV experience. I think it was cool the way they did that.
I think Marlene is Marlene from the game. I think that's
so
most
too.
High profile voice actor who played the same role in the show, and she did a really good job. And I agree. I think they did a good job of keeping the feel by having the creative forces behind the video game so involved. But I think really where they nailed it was they kept it very focused and grounded on like the emotional core of the two characters. And if anything, there weren't as many like fungus monsters as I thought there were going to be. Like seems like there were whole episodes where we didn't even see a single fungus monster. And so like they, out of the two directions, the fork and the path creatively that they came to, we're like, all right, is this going to just be a lot of big, crazy, like scary action set pieces? Or are we going to have a whole episode where it's like Ellie and her friend in the mall for 47 minutes and then 4 minutes of scary stuff, and I think they were willing to commit to keeping it kind of smaller and more personal, and I think that's what really paid off, because the first episode is so grand and so big that it sucks everybody in, but then the story and everything kind of it shrinks back down to what's really important, or it felt like it did for me, in general.
I would agree with that. I think comparing it to some of the only thing I can think of at the moment is The Walking Dead and how kind of a mess that show turned into being. It's about very similar things, the apocalypse to some degree of zombie-esque creatures. And that's obviously a larger group, but that's where that kind of got muddled and lost and didn't really know what it wanted to do. And that sort of stuff. And that had source material to follow as well. And it didn't really do that. Getting this quieter and smaller and more personal is absolutely the heart of this show and why it's so compelling.
Yeah, I was very happy that that's the direction they went, because I didn't play the game. I'm not really into video games much at all. And the draw for me was Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey.
Yeah.
I just heard, there's this show about like sort of zombies, and these two characters need to make their way across the country, and they're going to be played by these two actors. And I mean, they're both fantastic. I was big fans of them before the show. Bella Ramsey, until this year, all I had seen her in was in the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones as Lady Mormont, where she killed it.
Yep.
And then she had a new movie come out this past September called Catherine Called Birdie on Amazon Prime. And I thought she was very good in that. So just kind of building those expectations even more. And then both of them are great. And she especially is phenomenal. I mean, every second for me that she's on screen is compelling just for how good she is. Even I know this wasn't everybody's favorite episode, and I haven't looked, but I would guess this would be the lowest rated episode on IMDb, the sort of flashback with Ellie and her friend episode, which I enjoyed. It wasn't my favorite of the season, but I still liked it. And a large part of that is because Bella Ramsey is just that captivating. And her character is that interesting, where everything she did, I was just all about it. And then, so I really appreciate the focus that we got on character, because then it actually gives some weight to whenever those fungus monsters show up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just become another tired, like, they've survived this 9 times. Like,
we're just going to put them in a slightly different situation this time and see what happens. Like,
right. Because then when that happens, like with The Walking Dead, it just becomes, they've survived it so many times. So they almost need those characters to do something dumb.
Yeah. In
order to not, or then make it more about people, and the balance gets weird. But I like the balance here. I found it really interesting, the way they just focused on those two.
I found myself in this show, and I don't know how you guys felt, but I found myself being like constantly scared for our two main characters, that like something was good, because it's a horror show to a certain degree. Like, at what point is a scary thing just going to pop out? At what point is something just going to completely flip, and then it's going to be a terrifying situation and we're not sure if they're going to make it out? Even like the quiet scenes in one episode, they're like playing with a kid and like they go into the tunnels, but it's like seemingly safe. I was nervous the entire time, but it's because I cared so much about both Ellie and Joel. So that's what made me look nervous for them, is how good the writing was, how good the characters are. It makes me want to root for them on such a level that, like, I am never satisfied with us being quote unquote safe. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I think the show does a good job of cultivating that by killing characters that seem like they're going to be major character. Like, they, instead of obviously with The Walking Dead, you have a big group, so it's like, okay, we can pick off a few every season or whatever. And then in, Game of Thrones, you'd kill off major characters, but it would be kind of, like they'd build up to them, and there's so many characters that there's still a lot. I mean, here the whole show is only built on 2 characters. And so it felt like anyone besides them, anyone adjacent to them directly, was very at risk. And I felt totally expendable, which was good, because then you really truly don't know every episode. Like, this person they just met might die right now. Maybe they'll die 3 episodes from now. This person that we've been waiting to meet, maybe they'll die in 10 minutes.
It just keeps you on your toes, and makes it feel so much more like lived in and real. Like, you can literally insert yourself into the character and be like, this is how it is. Sorry.
I like that you brought that up, though, because I did want to mention how after Game of Thrones kind of set that expectation, basically at the end of season 1, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, we thought this was the main character, and now he's gone. There almost seems to me to be like a bit of an overreaction, where people have reached the point where they think like killing off characters automatically equals good TV.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where I see people reacting just like, oh yes, it's a show that kills off their characters, as if that's by itself is just good. And they do that a lot here with a lot of like, oh, they show up at the beginning of the episode, they're probably going to be dead by the end of it. How did you guys think they walked that balance? Do you think it was a little too much? Or, I mean, I think for the most part, they did it really well. It all felt organic. And even I think that's what makes some of those 2 sort of flashback episodes effective, is because they can do that again, but we already going into it kind of know that they're dead.
Yeah.
Like they do that twice where they send us back and we're like, okay, they're gonna we're leading up to present day here, and one of them for sure, with her friend, like we just know that that's how that's gonna end. The 3rd episode, which kind of blew people away, I think, with Nick Offerman and God, I can't remember that guy's name.
I can't either.
Yeah, the Bill and Frank episode, which kind of, I think that's where this series really turned, where before it was still just kind of apocalyptic stuff. And it was well executed, and it looked great, and it was interesting, and I was still in for the ride. But then they just pull this thing out of left field that nobody really expected, and it was done so well. That just at that point I was like, oh, these writers are capable of taking this in directions that is not the same as something like The Walking Dead or
for sure
Zombie Show Z,
or
a different one,
any apocalypse show, or a lot of those HBO.
You just feel like you're in such better hands with these writers that like you can trust them fully on any direction they want to go, because it's going to pay off.
Yeah. So we do end. There are a lot of episodes in this where we meet somebody at the beginning and they're dead within an episode or 2. And with only 9 episodes, I feel like that could have felt worse to me. Like it could have reached the point of almost self-parody after like episode 4. But somehow I think they pulled it off.
I mean, I think they pulled it off in general. The one that did kind of surprise me a little bit was the second to last episode, that kind of evil, creepy religious guy. I just feel like we spent so much time kind of getting to know him and that group that I thought they would be adversaries that would carry on to season 2. Because if I knew that guy was out there, like looking for them too, that would be an extra like, oh God, like they better watch out because he's a crazy mofo. So that one I was a little surprised that they actually completely killed him off and kind of ended that story. I see why they did, because it was all about Ellie's kind of character growth, but still maybe they could have left him alive. I don't know. But yeah, that was the only point where I thought, okay, maybe this is getting a little repetitive, but I think in general they did a good job of walking that line. We'll see what happens in season 2 if they go back to it. So
I heard that the game, there are 2 games for this.
There's 2 games.
And isn't the second one like 5 years later?
I don't know the timeline specifically. I know a couple things that happened
Okay.
throughout the games. Like, so I came in sort of familiar, but not really like
Yeah.
100%. I don't know the timeline, but I want to say there's a bit of a time jump. It can't be like right away.
I mean,
think we're
Ellie looks
getting one-
visibly older, just in the cover image
Okay.
of the game.
Yeah, I think we're getting a time jump for season 2, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Bella
I think-
Ramsey will be able to pull that off, anyways.
Well, she's already 19 anyway,
yeah.
She's gonna look a little bit different anyway.
and she's playing a 14-year-old. So time jump, you can play your own age now.
Yeah,
Nice.
you're gonna be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
To answer your question though, Nate, I think they were able to in this show. They're able to do the same thing, quote unquote, to introduce somebody, kill them off in a couple episodes, or not have them hang around for super long, because they're so focused on character. They're able to do that because you're focused on that specific character in their story, not how it necessarily how it affects the main two characters. Like I'm thinking specifically of episode 3, Frank and Bill, and how they're just able to tell a complete story that is in the same world but completely separate from our main characters. And they do it a couple times. So they found ways, they wrote ways to be interesting, and it basically just can encapsulate like a lifetime. Like you're going to get their intro, you're going to get their exit, and it's just what happens in between. So everything always felt fresh, even though they were doing the same device every time.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
and I think another reason for that too is to go back to your point on the main two characters with Joel and Ellie. A lot of the deaths are about one of their growth for one of their characters or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And pushing them into a new space. So I think that's why it still didn't quite feel like we're just doing the same thing over and over, because like when Tess dies, like that's kind of a big deal. That is a big deal for Joel. And then the Henry and his brother, I can't remember his brother's name, at the end of 5.
Sam.
That's the first time we kind of get to see Ellie get attached to somebody and then lose them really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So and then Dylan, you mentioned episode 8 where it's just like full on rage and she has to go to a darker place than anybody should ever have to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So they do it in a way that I think is constantly helping the main two characters evolve as far as the story's going. So that's another reason that I think it works.
The deaths serve a purpose.
Yeah.
I never reached a point where I thought any of them were purposeless or pointless. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say, should we get into the last episode then and kind of go over how we feel about the end of season 1?
So before we get that, I just want to say there's one episode in particular, I believe it's episode 7, that I had a full like jaw on the floor moment for about like 10 to 15 minutes. They're getting chased. They're getting caught essentially. And maybe it's 7.
I think that's 5.
It's
chased
salmon,
by
salmon.
monsters or human beings?
Chased by human beings
In Kansas City?
It's outside
this is
of
a spoiler
Kansas City.
episode, so you can bring up
I'm trying to think. So it's Sam the little kid, and his brother.
Yeah,
What's his brother's name? Oh, that's 5. Anyway, episode 5, as there's a truck that crashes, because I don't want to spoil this moment because it was so fun. Because like if you've seen the show, great, but if you haven't and you're still listening to us, I want you to go see the show and experience this because I found it so great.
Then don't protect them. If they're still listening and they haven't seen it, they don't need your protection.
There was a full jaw on the floor bit for like 10 minutes where I was just like, we have reached full video game territory. Like we have truly gone all for it, and it fucking nails it. It is such an awesome moment, and the final to that episode is fantastic. But it's such an awesome moment that just made me go like, this is absolutely exactly what I wanted. It's exactly what I think fans of the games wanted. You wanted to have a little bit of like, there's that realism, but there's also that little bit of fantasy that shows like, what else can we play with? What else can we do here? How far can we truly stretch like our imaginations, and that while keeping it realistic feeling? And that was just an awesome fucking moment. I just thought that was the best part of the series for me. So now we can get to the end. I just want to mention that.
That episode too, that part did remind me of the hard home scene in Game of Thrones for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's pretty good.
A lot of similarities there. So, all right. So episode 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'll just say general thoughts. Like, they did follow what happens in the video game, and so I commend them for that. And I didn't have a problem with it. The only problem I had is that the final episode was only like 45 minutes long.
Yeah,
and so it just felt like we were cutting it shorter than we had to, no matter what happened. I just felt like, because like 20 minutes into the episode, I'm like, this thing's gonna end soon. Like it was just kind of a bummer. I would have been okay with 10 more minutes of filler in there, because by this point I'm already loving the show and it's the finale, so I'm gonna be glued to the screen. So like I would have taken some filler just to make it feel more like a real full episode, and maybe that would have that's really the only thing, is it just felt a little unsatisfying just because it was shorter unexpectedly.
Yeah, I mean, it was also, we got that kind of extended cold open too. So like that cuts into the time. So there was only like probably 38 minutes of Joel and Ellie in the last episode. In this, they've been looking for the Fireflies for the entire season, and we finally get there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was over really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the way that they play what plays out as something sad.
Me too.
And not something triumphant.
Mm-hmm.
Although, like, we're glad Ellie's alive, obviously. But we definitely watch that and think, like, Joel, dude.
Like, out of character, seemingly.
Kind of. We kind of got that glimpse.
In character, out of theme.
Yeah, we got that glimpse to maybe who he was before he met Ellie, though. So... Like, we kind of get alluded to these horrible things that he's done in the past, so we know he's capable of them.
Yep.
But this time it was different because she kind of woke him up again, and he doesn't want to lose again.
Yep. Yep.
So, I don't know. It was an interesting choice for the final episode. And from a character perspective, I thought it worked really well. From a plot perspective, it felt a little bit like kind of a clean, easy way to just, like, move on from this whole Fireflies cure thing. Like that could have tied a complicated net, or not really. Mm-hmm. But instead they basically just blew the whole thing up and said that's over.
Yeah. It's interesting. It shifts the whole, because the show is so personal and about these two main characters, it shifts the whole show, because now Joel's motivation is completely different in going into season 2 than it was season 1. He's gone from a man on a mission to now someone who's going to protect Ellie at any costs, including maybe what she wants, right? Like and that's very interesting that going into season 2 now we have like the dynamic of just like what his purpose in life, or what he thinks it is, has changed. And then for her it's changed because it's like, okay, do I really trust this guy? Like, what really happened? It creates a very interesting dynamic going into season 2, I felt like, and that's interesting, because now you have this huge thing hanging in the air.
It's just this crack of a rift that will, I'm sure, develop into some sort of chasm that just like between these characters that are clearly like stuck together in more than one way, and it just starts to slowly peel them, and like we'll see how they develop it.
Yeah, and and I think it was like, to your point, Nate, how it's sad. It does a good job of being like morally, like, it is a kind of a dilemma. Like, it puts the audience in a weird place. Like, what would you do? And I think that it does a good job of that. While I was watching it, I was definitely thinking like, man, like, she just told you that like she wanted all this to have a purpose. That was like the whole thing. She just wanted it to mean something. So like, I don't know. It's definitely I was viewing it as like, Joel is definitely making the wrong decision here.
Absolutely. It's such a dissatisfying ending for everything the season, or that has happened throughout the season. It's so, he makes a choice and they both have to live with it, and she's not sure she's on board with it because she's not really sure what happened, but in a way, she knows something's up.
In a way, it's perfect, because it is the perfect type of thing, like, for like, the whole season was building to this, right? Yeah. Like the person who Joel was at the beginning when they first met, everything that's happened the last 8 episodes has just kind of changed him inside and brought him to a point where now this is who he is. And like, if it would have gone smooth and they would have gotten there like in 2 weeks, and he would have dropped off Ellie and been like, all right, bye. Like, he probably would have been like, I just helped, he wouldn't have cared. But they went through all this, and now he's literally like, he can't go back to who he was at the beginning of the show and not care. And so then it's like, everything he's been through, like you said, Nate, is he going to allow it? Is he going to go through this pain again? Like, I don't know. I felt it was very effective. I just wish there would have been more. And it did feel a little quick. It felt like they get abducted. and then all of a sudden he's hearing what's happening, and then she's like, all right, you two poor guys, take this guy out of the hospital. We know he's super dangerous. You guys go escort him out. Just you two. Good luck. I was like, oh, the second that she told them to do that, I'm like, they're dead.
Yeah, for sure.
Suicide mission.
Well, and then you hear as he starts going off, you hear like in the distance, like shots fired, and you're like, well, you better just run, dude. Like,
yeah, I really like how it does give us something new that we just know we're getting into with season 2. Because there was a way to do that where it felt like, oh, we're just going to be it doesn't feel like we're back where we started.
No.
Yeah.
And that makes it really interesting going forward. I also think that it's interesting how they made her explanation for what the doctors are going to do sound a little too simple and kind of like bullshit, and like they don't necessarily know that this is even going to work. So I like that element too, because that allows you to have sort of just another way to look at like, well, if it wasn't going to work, then he probably just maybe did the right thing.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't have a way that this was actually going to happen,
like for sure, like 100%.
Right. Like it felt like they have test number 1 and it results in her being dead.
Yeah.
Like it really felt like they
there goes your shot.
Like they couldn't have just drawn some blood.
I thought
and
that
started
too.
From there. That's where I kind of feel like the show puts it in an interesting, because Joel didn't react to something reasonable. Right? It wasn't like, oh, she's going to be an observation. We're going to bring in something to bite her again. Like, even if that would have been like, no, screw that, you'd kind of be like, what do you expect them to do?
Yeah.
But with this, where they were just like, yeah, we're going to remove some stuff from her brain, and then she's probably going to die. And if that works, cool.
Our
and if it
doctor's
doesn't,
pretty sure
killed the person who
he thinks this is what he has to do, because like that's what's said. They're like, he thinks that our doctor thinks this is the way it's going to go, and he's like, wait a second, it lives in the brain, and they're like, yeah, and he's like, do you not understand what that means? Like, now I have to do something, and then there we go.
What they were doing felt way too quick, and they didn't feel like they had a good plan. So I like that added element, because it gives a whole nother way to look at it.
For sure.
Yeah. A lot of questions asked, and it's a perfect setup to, like you guys were saying, it's a perfect setup to go into the new season with different expectations, different character traits. Like you essentially just reinvented each of those people, and you put them in the same situation, which is exciting.
Also, you've done a really good job of establishing the danger of the fungus, like the different forms it can come in. There's like the clickers, there's like the big strong dude who ripped that dude's head off. Like, they've done a good job of establishing like the monster side of the show without hammering it to death, without overdoing it. Going into season 2, like, I don't know what to expect, but I definitely don't feel like I've seen it all. I feel like I've barely seen the beginning of what this
barely scratched the surface. Yeah.
And so that's really cool. And that leaves them a lot of room to, push the envelope and come up with cool action set pieces and stuff. I love that they established the creature feature part of it, but they didn't overdo it. And I think that's really, really good decision.
I did see that the writers and creators of the show came out and said that there will be more. We'll call them zombies, but what did you call them earlier? The fungus
the something
people.
Seps,
cordyceps
or whatever.
Cordyceps. Yeah, there'll be more of those creatures in more action in season 2, which is good. But also, as long as it doesn't stray too far, which I trust them enough to not stray too far from the hallmarks of this show already, or what is driving and what is good about this show. So that'll be just a little bit more of like an added little bonus to see what kind of stuff we can get, what kind of stuff they can come up with. So excited for season 2.
Yeah.
Me as well. So we're not doing any stars this episode. Just wanted to discuss Last of Us and kind of geek out a little bit about it.
Whose turn we'd all recommend it.
Give it all of the awards right now. I don't see anything else impressing me this much this year.
And we did talk about how the final episode is short, but the first episode is extra long, and the first episode is pretty damn good. I feel like it is if you watch the first episode, you're going to be hooked. Like,
dude, talk about an intro to the world ending. Like, that is some fucking TV.
And it has all the elements that makes the whole show good in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, All right. Whose turn is it to put a wrap on the show?
That would be mine. Adam, you got the
I gotcha.
All
outro and
right.
everything?
Take it away, Nate.
All right. I was never afraid before you showed up.